Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits Special Edition video. Well, I kind of teased this the other day on my community tab and then also on my Facebook page with regards to a special set of news. In this case, it has to do with my review of a movie that I've been trying to see for a good while now, especially after I'd seen the Sir No Face film. So, just all because of good timing, circumstances, I was able to finally find this movie, in this case called American Ghost Hunter. Found that they're on Hulu, and it looks like it's still playing there for free right now. And then that way I could give my review of this film. This is a film that one of the earlier films from Chad Kalick, who again was the one that just recently did the Sir No Face film that I also reviewed a little couple weeks back. I'm gonna include a link for that review too. So if you haven't had a chance to see my review on that film, be on the lookout for that link. And then also you'll be able to hear, of course, of this review of his other film. And as always, I talk about the pros and the cons associated with the review. So let's go ahead and let's talk about, in this case, my overall review of the American Ghost Hunter. So, when it comes to this film, it was something that was on my bucket list of sorts. This was a film that I had heard about a couple years back, and it interested me because at the time I was watching Paranormal State with Ryan Buell, and then just through the proxy, just by hearing his news, it came about that he was going to be featured in this documentary. So this particular film was one that was apparently created by like a crowdfunding of sorts. Apparently there was a good set of controversy with that too. I had no idea about all this news until looking after the fact more recently on it. It's nice when it comes to period of time how history just creates all this news for you, and you can catch up to it all at once. But yes, apparently there was some good controversy with the delay of the film, people not getting the DVDs, other things going on, I guess, with refunds, whatever is the case with this American Ghost Hunter. It went through all that, and then it was finally released, and then people gave it, a lot of people, bad reviews, and then other people, a good portion of I guess fans of Chad Kalick, gave it good reviews. Either way though, time has passed and now it's there on Hulu. So if you do have Hulu now, you can see it for free. I don't know how long it'll last. You know how these things go with Hulu, Netflix, and other places where they seem to just put them on temporarily and then they'll be gone afterward. But either way though, up front, I do recommend seeing it. If you're a fan of anything involving ghosts, involving spirits, then this is your opportunity to see a good, not great, but good documentary of that world. And so here's my pros associated with the film, why I recommend seeing it. First off, it is definitely very down to earth. Like, this is a movie that was made specifically, it's kind of hard to put it another way, but it's for our level. All of us that are pretty much like budget ghost hunters, those that are just overall fans of the world of ghosts and spirits, and maybe a little bit more into it when it comes to actually doing our own expeditions. This is the kind of film for us. And what I mean is this: it's very much, again, appears like Chad Kalick is very much like one of us. Like he's you and I basically, but he just happens to be doing these ghost hunts and making films about them at the same time. It's not a big production. It's not something that involves multi-million-dollar locations and then also having huge guest stars with huge budgets to match for it. No, this is something that seemed almost amateurish, but in a good way. It makes it seem more authentic. It's probably the best way I can state, because it's coming from and by a fan as opposed to a big Hollywood production. That's the feeling that I got throughout most of the film when I was watching it. Right from the very beginning, when I saw the credits and the way that the scenes were playing out, it definitely again makes it feel like it was made by one of us. And then that way, it kind of puts it in a more positive light, at least in my opinion. Some other people might think that when some things are involving amateur stuff, that it makes it less good, like less overall quality production. But I tend to be the opposite. It makes it seem like this is somebody that's truly putting like their money where their mouth is when they're making these stuff. They're using it towards these productions, and in that way, it's truly coming from a passionate place, and it shows like it seemed like there was a good amount of detail that was placed in each of the locations that they visited. More on that just in a little bit. And then also some of the interviews that were given as well. Some of the cutaway scenes were good, and then there were some jumps here and there between his family and then other places, including very tiny cuts of actual evidence, which is something that I remember reading a lot of people were against. A lot of people that were putting negative reviews of the film were all up against, because to them they wanted it almost like another Ghost Adventures type production where it showcases huge amounts of evidence, but here it's just a couple of seconds at a time. So I didn't really mind that part. I guess I didn't go in expecting another Ghost Adventures. Maybe that's why it seemed better for me. But that's at least a lot of things that, in my opinion, again, make it seem more authentic instead of, let's say, a big, huge, fake type Hollywood production. And then as far as the locations, yes, I just mentioned that. I liked it because it went to a lot of local locations, small locations, the kind of stuff that at the end of the day I'd be going to myself when it comes to my own expedition. Maybe I'm a little bit more biased on that part because I do these things on my own, and then I go out and I visit all these wonderful places, but it's the smaller ones, the ones that people hardly ever hear about, but that's what attracts me. And that's why I love to go see it, because the less people that are there, the more chances that I'll have a good opportunity to do a good hunt. Such was the case here. He went through various locations, including some kind of axe murder house that seemed like it was just like a small house up in the attic, and then also towards another place that was like a newspaper printing place, in that place down on the basement, and then another home, including his own family home as well. All these local areas, tiny ones, just made it seem to me like it was that much more authentic. It was a great way of showcasing truly, like if you were to pull back the curtain within any town, in this case small town America, you will always find some tiny place that has a haunted area. Like there's always going to be something that seems to be there that people know about, that know that feel that it's a haunted place, and all you got to do is just look. But I love it. I love it whenever anything has to do with smaller local locations, and that's what happened here. Another pro happens to be again with Paranormal States and Ryan Buell. So it was great to see him in this role there within the documentary. He took almost like a secondary side host of sorts, where he was there just to accompany Chad, and then that way go about his business with Chad towards, I guess, finding out what was happening with his mom, what was happening with his family, and then some of the other people that were interviewed there as well from that town. And then, of course, going to some of those local locations I just mentioned. But yes, it was nice seeing Ryan in there. And instead of going in the forefront, like let's say being the star, he just decided to take a secondary approach for this. So I don't know exactly if he was there. I think they were friends since that time for a while. So I don't know exactly if he was there to help fund the film or if he was there to do something else with it, just lend his support. Whatever's the case, he was a good addition. So it was nice to see him there. And then lastly, like a nice pro on this was there truly a payoff? Like there's always the idea that people that they want the films that they watch to go to a big climax, and then there's a payoff, and then that's it, a finality. But in this case, you have to remember, no, there is none, and that kind of frustrated people again, because to them, they kind of wanted, in that case, to have the Chad's mom to have a resolution for whatever was happening towards her attacks. But it kind of left it open-ended, especially when it came to the family members there too. So all of that, again, made people mad. It made them pissed off because they thought, well, what's the whole point of the film then? There's nothing else in terms of some kind of climax or finalization. But you have to remember, it's a down-to-earth type film. So whenever I kept thinking about that, it made me realize that just makes it far more real. There is no true ending to these kind of things, not like the big Hollywood endings that people normally expect. So in a way, it kind of added to the authenticity, everything that I was mentioning earlier, tying into that word one more time when it comes to this film, and having it be true to life, in other words. And so it ended with some ending credits, the kind of stuff that usually shows like what happens afterward. But otherwise, having a true payoff, it does not have it. But I think it made it a much better film afterward. Leaving it open ended two always begs the idea that there's going to be a follow up afterward. Now, as far as the cons, yes, even though this was a good film and it's something I do recommend, it did have its faults. So here's some of the ones associated with it. The one that instantly stood out was it felt very disjointed, very jumpy, especially in certain places. All of a sudden, it would focus on his family, and then it would jump to a nighttime spot where they're going to that basement there in the newspaper, the haunted newspaper printing place. Why? Like, how did it suddenly jump from there, from the family's house to that location? It didn't make much sense to me. Maybe I missed a couple of things here and there, but having it happen several times, like in this case, having it also be towards the axe murder house, and then all of a sudden jumping towards interviews with other people, it made it very disjointed. Plus, the narrative about trying to attach all these haunted locations to his family, it kind of made it seem like it was not too strong of a link. Like, how exactly does an axe murder house suddenly fit into the narrative of Chad Kallick's family? I can kind of understand when he was talking more to the locals how it was impacting the city as a whole, but how is it exactly towards his family and what's happening to his mom? I think it was too loose of a link in that case. Also, speaking of family, too much focus on one single family, in this case, his own family. Kind of hard to consider it a con only because that's his family. He knows obviously more about what had happened to them throughout their entire history. But at least I was hoping that they would start focusing on other people there in the city. So there was a points again that I mentioned where it seemed like whatever was happening in that town seems to be impacting a lot more people. There was even interviews with some of the locals about the suicide rates and how they seem to be going up and up because of whatever is there, whether it's an aura or some kind of entity or something else, some spirit that just seems to be placing a curse on that location. Instead of just focusing on Chad Kallick's family, like why not focus it on others? I think that would have added more credibility to that idea, and it would have made and presented a far more interesting argument to do so too. All those brief spots involving interviews with the locals, those definitely stood out. I wanted to hear more of that stuff. Maybe that's a strength from and me seeing so many episodes of Ghost Adventures, they do a pretty good job of interviewing a lot of the locals and bringing a lot of the locals to the actual haunted locations too. So if they had that, that would have been great. Plus, it would have been fantastic to explore those locals and their own hauntings. There was very brief, like tiny spots where some people would state that they were experiencing their own things as well, and I was hoping that that could happen. Speaking of which, there was a great spot that I kind of wish it would have been explored more. At the same time, no, but there was a spot where it was focusing on this guy who was able to use his engineering skills to almost like reverse, in this case, the Lord's Prayer, and then find hidden messages associated with it. Apparently, that's a huge no-no, and maybe I shouldn't have listened to it when it was being played, but it opened up a whole other set of possibilities that the documentary could have explored, and it made it seem very tense, like it was something like you shouldn't hear this kind of stuff. All of a sudden, like that stood out tremendously. So it's that kind of stuff. I wish I would have focused more on that than again just one entire family. Lastly, another con. I know a lot of people like this. To me, it definitely stood out like a sore thumb, and that happened to be with all of a sudden bringing in Miss Elaine Warren, in this case from the infamous Warrens, the ones that were there for a lot of the cases like the Annabelle doll and others. So all of a sudden she's there, she's brought in and she's interviewed to bring her perspective. The only loose connection being that apparently Chad Kallick had somebody from the Warrens, who later turned out didn't really work for them, come by and then work with his mom to try to find out what's going on with her hauntings, with her possessions. But either way, though, it all ended up with bringing Miss Warren herself, and it just stood out. Like it was, as almost like it was, she was there for a couple minutes out of the blue, and then she was gone. It made it seem to me like it was again tying into being disjointed. So having her there, it made it more it like where it shouldn't, where maybe it would have been like a bonus content rather than, let's say, fitting her into the narrative of the film itself, of the documentary itself. But either way, though, I thought it stood out. But that's the only other con that I could think of. But all in all, American Ghost Hunter, good film, good documentary by Chad Kallick. I'm becoming more of a fan of him after seeing this one and then Sir No Face, and then looking at some of the other films that he has now, like Two Face the Grey. Try to see if, when that becomes available somewhere free or somewhere like on Hulu, and then I'll be able to see that movie too. But yes, if you have a chance, go see it on Hulu. I'm sure it's probably out there as a rental somewhere else on Amazon, probably for like $1 or $2. So either way, though, you can always find it. I'll include the link for it if I can too below, and then also check out my review again of his other film, the one I just mentioned, Sir No Face. I would give this about 3.5. I'm sorry, 3 out of 5 stars. As a good effort, not great, but not bad either, and still an overall good recommendation to see. So, but all right, everybody, those of you that have seen it, let me know what your opinions are. Is this something that you like as well? Something that you hate? Anything else that stands out that you would mention in the comments? Whatever your overall review is, please post those comments below. So, all right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.